I recently picked up this 2017 ND Mazda MX5 Miata after dreaming about them since they debuted in 2016. This is a fantastic car that's super fun and very sporty. But I've come up with a list of 5 things that bother me about this car that I wanted to share with you. Without further ado, let's get into 5 things that bother me about the ND Mazda MX5 Miata. Alright, so the first flaw on the list is the weird bump in the passenger footwell area. So if you come in the car here, you can see that there's a very large protrusion in the passenger floor that takes up quite a lot of room. I was curious about why this bump existed, and looking online, this is actually where your catalytic converter sits. So the exhaust comes down off the engine, around the transmission, and your catalytic converter is right here under your feet, taking up a bunch of room. Now, over on the driver's side, there's also a small bump, which I'll show you, but it's less pronounced as the one on the passenger side. I don't know, let me know down below what you would think as a passenger in this car with this large protrusion here. Alright, so number 2 on my list of flaws with the ND Miata is rearward visibility, especially when the top is up. So right now I have the top down and the visibility is pretty good because obviously there's no convertible top over me, there's no top coming up next to me, and I could look backwards both ways fairly well. One area that is not great with the top down is straight back if I were looking over my shoulder, but if you look through the rear view mirror, you could see pretty well. Looking out the back of the car, it's definitely a lot higher up here than the NA and NB cars, and the reason that rear visibility suffers on newer Miatas versus older ones is the doors are higher, crash standards have been getting stricter and stricter, which means generally there's going to be more car protecting the driver versus the older cars, which makes it actually a little bit harder to see out the back. So now I'll put the top up and show you that you get some pretty big blind spots. I got my go-kart over to the left here. It's going to be very hard to see with the convertible top up. Alright, so now we got the top up just to show off the rear visibility, and it's really not that good. So if I turn to my right and need to see behind me, there's a lot of space that's blocked by the top. And if I turn to my left without using my mirrors, obviously you should be using your mirrors, but I can't see the go-kart that I know is right behind me to my left because this is a really big area that's blocked by the top up here. Now, with the Miata, with a small car, you have to be a very heads-up driver anyway because you're small and less visible than most giant cars on the road, especially in the US here. And these blind spots do not really help you in that situation because you have to be extra aware and pay attention to these blind spots with this car. Alright, so for number 3 on my list of things that annoy me about this car, we have wind noise and road noise. So these cars, being the lightweight and affordable sports cars that they are very minimalistic cars. That means that there's not a lot of sound deadening, there's not a lot of material that go into these cars, and it means that there's not a lot isolating you, the tires, and the car from the road. Because of that, at speed, right now we're getting up to about 50 miles an hour, and there's a moderate amount of road noise, and if I had the radio on, I would be turning the radio up. If I'm talking to my passenger, at this point, even just talking to you at the camera, I could feel myself having to talk louder just to get over the sound level within this car. Now, this car definitely is not a luxury car. It's a lightweight, affordable sports car, and you shouldn't expect it to be totally isolated from the road, super luxury and super quiet. But for longer drives, and if you want to have a conversation with your passenger, sometimes it does get a little bit frustrating in this car. Alright, so now we're driving with the windows down, and obviously windows down in any car is going to be loud, and this car is no exception. So if you're going on long trips, having the windows down is super nice, having the top down is super nice, but again, it's going to be on the louder side versus being in a car that's a non-convertible, being a more substantial car, and it's just something that you have to think about if it's worth it. For me, I love driving around in these cars, so it's not something that really bothers me most of the time, but occasionally I'll wish it was a little bit quieter and just a little bit more luxury feeling and isolated from the road. All right, so number 4 on the list of things that annoy me about this car is the lack of good cup holders and the fact that cup holders are removable in these cars. So if you go ahead and take a look at the interior, you can see that there are 3 spots for cup holders. There's a spot in the passenger side right here, and then there are 2 spots back here behind this little center console. So these are very removable cup holders, and when I bought this car, it actually didn't come with any cup holders, and that really caught me out on my first drive to work when I was up super early in the morning, had my tea in hand, got in the ND to go drive to work, and had absolutely nowhere to put that mug. So if you're looking at these cars used, make sure that they still have the cup holders in there, because they could be taken out by previous owners. The reason I find this a bit annoying that they could be taken out is they're a fairly expensive piece. On eBay right now, they're selling for about $80 each, and that means if you get a car that doesn't have one, it's gonna cost you quite a bit to put cup holders in. And then also, even if you have the cup holders that come with the NDs, they're not super nice cup holders, and I've been reading a lot of complaints online about people who weren't super happy with how well the cup holders actually held their drinks, so that's something I think Mazda could have done a little bit better. Number 5 on my list is that Miatas do not have very much storage space. And if you're watching this video, you obviously know that Miatas are a small car and you can't bring a ton of stuff with you, but take a look at this car. This car weighs about the same as a NA Miata, so even though it's a newer car that's slightly bigger in dimension, it's really not that much bigger than even a first generation Miata. In here, I mean, you have the passenger seat and you have the passenger footwell to put stuff if you don't have a passenger. But if you do have a passenger with you, there's not a ton of extra room within the interior of this car to put stuff. So then you're pretty much limited to the trunk. There are a few storage areas in here that I'll show you. It has a small center console right in the middle here where you could keep some stuff. It's a pretty small compartment though. Then there's this little tray right in the middle, and there's nothing that opens over here on the passenger side of the car. So there's no traditional glove box right there, which means there's less storage space up here. There is a little tray right here, which actually extends pretty far forward, and I tend to put my phone in there just to show you. I put that there. Not a fantastic fit, but also not terrible. And the main part of the storage in this car is back here. So your glove box is actually right here, right in the back of the car. It extends pretty far forward. I got my registration paperwork and stuff like that in there. So you could store some things in there, but it's not a crazy amount of storage. Now, there are 2 hidden storage compartments in the ND, which I didn't know about, which I could show you right now. So if you slide your seat forward, behind the seats, there are 2 compartments right there, which are pretty well hidden. And I think most people don't know about these or wouldn't know about them when they first got this car. And it's really just like a fabric pocket here that you could store some stuff behind you. So that's about what you're limited to in the interior of the car. It's not a ton. And now I'll just show you the trunk so you can get a feel for the size of that. All right, so trunk space in the Miata isn't very plentiful. It's not terrible, but you can't fit a lot of stuff in there. So here we got 1 backpack, so we'll put this in here. And it fills out a moderate amount of the trunk. You could probably fit about 3 backpacks like that in there. This is a 34-inch longboard, so it's on the shorter side for longboards. And again, it'll fit in there, but you can't fit a whole ton of other stuff in there, and you definitely have to be strategic with what you're carrying with these cars. That said, if you're determined, you could cram stuff into the trunk, you could strap stuff to the top of the car, but to be clean and have stuff tucked away nicely, you can't carry a whole ton of stuff with you. All right, guys, so with that, that wraps up my list of my top 5 flaws with the ND Mazda MX5 Miata. Comment down below if you think there are any other flaws with this car that people should know about, if there are any things you don't like, or things you would change with the design of this car. Don't forget to like this video if you've enjoyed it, subscribe for more, and I hope you stick around for more content here on the channel.